Welcome to the Single Father Podcast. I am your host, Kendall Doniker. This podcast is dedicated for anyone out there who's dealing with mental health and fatherhood. You'll hear about my struggles, my defeats, my victories, my highs, my lows, my triumphs, my tribulations, and everything in between. I like to call this a collection of journal entries into my struggle and adapting to single fatherhood. Without further ado, let's take a look inside my journal, the Single Father Podcast. Well, hello, ladies, gentlemen, and otherwise. Thank you for listening today and being a part of my journal, because that's really what this podcast is. It's me opening my personal journal up to you guys so you guys can listen, vent, and share my experiences with me. And hopefully, maybe I help you in some experiences yourself. I want to apologize right off the bat because, as I've mentioned in early episodes, the sound quality on my end is not the best. Dr. Susanna Chen's, her sound quality is amazing and phenomenal, but mine, as the first couple episodes are, I'm just working out the kinks and the tweaks and, figuring out what works and what doesn't. And so I promise you later episodes, they get absolutely phenomenal, but just bear with me for the sound quality on my end is not great, but it does get better. Just, bear with me. I'm really happy about this episode. It's really amazing because I feel like I got a really good, I feel like I really got really amazing information to use for my daughter. This episode is all about women empowerment and, maybe how I can gain some information from my daughter, who she turned 2 over the weekend, which is amazing. And, it's kind of crazy as a parent because you buy your child all these expensive things. And a little side note too. I mean, you think that you buy a lot of stuff for yourself now. Imagine when you have a child and you're just constantly thinking all the time, oh, that would be good for my daughter, or that would be good for my son, and things like that. And it's kind of overwhelming because remember I went grocery shopping the other day and I bought a whole bunch of stuff for my daughter, and I, for the most part, forgot to buy myself food, which is kind of ridiculous. But anyways, she turned 2 and it was really exciting. We had a little get together with my family and, nothing crazy because COVID, but, some of my close family was there, and it was really amazing just seeing her have an amazing time. And she loved all of her gifts. And if I must say, I think Dad for the win, because I got her this baby stroller and this little baby doll as well, and she really liked it. And I'm really excited because she's growing. She's saying, or she's speaking in full sentences. And, everyone knows that I just thoroughly enjoy being a dad. It's like my favorite thing in the world is just being a dad to that little girl. It's amazing. It really is. The way she smiles and the way she says my name, I just can't think of anything more joyous in my life. But to my point, it is a little bit difficult because you'll buy her all this stuff and sometimes she doesn't even pay attention to it. And, sometimes I just don't know what I'm doing, People say, well, when I have my second child, then I knew what I was doing. But do I want a second child? It's kind of hard being a single dad. I'm not going to lie. Co-parenting's not great either. I mean, it's great because her mother and I are good friends, but I think you know what I mean. Anyways, again, this episode it hits home for me because not only do I speak to the most amazing, strong, entrepreneur woman I've ever met in my life, I knew that there was no better person to speak to because, Dr. Susanna Chen, she spoke at the United Nations and she's all about women empowerment. And I felt like she gave me some really great tips and some insight mostly on how to better inform myself on kind of the struggles and trials that women go through on a daily basis. Sometimes, especially as a man, you don't really think about a lot of that stuff. And within when I was speaking to her, I was kind of like, oh, and I had a lot of questions for her, because I was just generally curious, and it opened my eyes a little bit. And I think men can really benefit themselves by maybe just asking questions and getting informed. And I hope this episode really helps men become informed, but also helps women out there into knowing that they're not alone in their struggles as well. There's a lot of people out there that really just think they're alone in dealing with some of these things that they're going through. And one of my main focuses on doing this podcast is to make people know that they're not alone. And I thought, Dr. Chen really gave great insight and great tips on how to go through, and how to handle some of these trials that women may go through. And I got really great information just from my daughter as well. I wanted to stay informed, based on, me being a single dad to a now 2-year-old girl. I want to learn what I can, for when she's older, which is a scary thought. I mean, she already slams doors in my house now. I can't imagine when she's a teenager. Oh my God. By the way, it's all just informational purposes. It's not used for medical advice or anything like that. But I hope you listen and enjoy. And without further ado, let's vent.
Hello, doctor. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really wonderful. Thank you for being a part of today's episode with me. This is wonderful to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And I have to say, just as a little side note, I emailed you and I was asking a little bit about kind of certain topics that you cover, and some of your, I guess, passions and whatever. And I was expecting this little brief summary, and the answer you gave me was such a profound answer, and I was blown away because you really gave me a really detailed list about everything that you cover and that you're passionate about. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm excited to speak to her. Like I really was excited. I was blown away. So how are you feeling? You're almost two. You're pregnant. You're almost two, right?
Yeah, almost there.
I mean, I have a little. She just turned 2 over the weekend, and I remember when my fiance at the time. I remember when she was pregnant. I was constantly getting her just food runs and just wild things like that. Is that you at all or no?
Well, I think it comes and goes. It's very interesting and sort of experience, really, and it's so
Yeah.
unique to each person. So every single person's experience with pregnancy and delivery and all that is so different, and
Yeah.
how people react to it is different.
And is this your first one?
Yep,
Yeah. And boy or girl?
a boy.
Awesome. So you get to teach them all about this good stuff.
Yeah, hopefully I can impart a lot of knowledge on him.
Well, I'm hoping that you can do the same with me today. What I really want to discuss with you was women and mental health. And I'm excited to speak to you about it because not only do I know for certain that you are the best person to speak to, but with me having a daughter myself, I really want to, gain as much knowledge as I can so I can be able to not only understand, but be able to guide her as well. And I think men, especially, can have a tough time in, I guess, resonating a little bit. And so, first, I'd love for you to tell me just a little bit about yourself and your background.
Definitely. Well, I also want to say, it's wonderful that you are trying to do this, for your daughter and just in general, because family and men, are huge advocates for women and women's mental health. So really, it's so important and it's so amazing to hear that you're really, putting in the effort and you really want to do this.
Thank you. I try for sure. I want to make sure that she grows up to be this little queen and feels like one too.
So, so my name is Dr. Susanna Chen. I'm an MD board certified psychiatrist, and I own a private practice in Manhattan, New York City. Offices in Manhattan and Brooklyn as well, although also doing a lot of telepsychiatry and
Definitely.
teletherapy during the COVID time as well.
Yeah. It's how's that been going for you really and your family? It's been hard. I imagine I always imagine it might be scary to be pregnant during a pandemic.
Well, it just shows that life throws lots of curveballs at us and
Yeah.
at really unexpected times. Certainly had no idea that COVID was going to happen.
Right.
Got pregnant, so it just shows you never know, and it's how we
Right.
really deal with the situations that come to us. Because
Yeah.
it's in a way we're all adjusting to something very unprecedented and something very different, but we're all in it together, really.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely it tests your mental health a little bit. And one of the things that I was really impressed by you is kind of how you own your own practice and you seem like this kind of like self-made woman, which is really impressive. And I definitely idolize that. And I think one of the things that you wrote me is people have this idea about maybe a psychiatrist is just this old white man, right? And why is it so important to you to kind of, break that stigma and, really how did you get involved in this type of work specifically?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned in the email, a lot of people sort of have this idea, and it makes sense, right? Because when we go to school, we learn about Freud and, a lot of people who are exactly sort of these old white male psychiatrists. And we learn about the previous treatment and thoughts about when they called women hysterical and all these different ideas that they had and theories. And so it's understandable that a lot of people may be reserved and concerned about that when thinking about trying to find support around their mental health and trying to see if they
Yeah.
need to get treatment. And it can come from really our history in terms of psychiatry in general, but also depending if the person is coming from a different country as well, then there's also a history of psychiatry being used really in negative ways. And there were certainly a lot of mistakes made in history, and this idea of coming to then a psychiatrist, especially when we think of the stereotypical psychiatrist, it's understandable that people would be afraid and worried and not so comfortable. So it is important for me to show that there's increasing diversity, thankfully, slowly, but thankfully we're getting
Yeah.
there. There's definitely increasing diversity in the mental health field, in psychiatry, and overall in mental health professionals. There's also people, from different backgrounds and female psychiatrists, people
Right.
who may be more comfortable with when you're looking for mental health treatment, especially when it's something specific to you being as a woman, in
Yeah.
society. And you're wondering, are they going to understand me and are they going to empathize with me?
Definitely. I think that's so important. To be honest, I think I resonate in the therapy world with women more because I feel more. I don't know. I feel more comfortable. To be honest, I feel like they're nicer to me. They don't judge me as hard. But I really wanted to ask you. I know you also mentioned since we're on the topic of pregnancy, you said there's not a lot of research involving mental health with women, and especially pregnant women. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so even just in general, in terms of the medical field, we're doing a disservice to women because we don't have enough research. And part of it is logistics. The people doing research studies don't want to take a chance on, enrolling women who might be of fertile age, who might get pregnant, or women who are already pregnant. They're worried about just the legal part of it. And so usually, unfortunately, a lot of our research is based on middle-aged white males. you
Mhm.
know
Yeah.
and so when you're looking at the complex human experience and how our bodies react to different medications, how we metabolize different things, how different disorders or diseases look differently in us, it shows that in like heart attacks can look very different for women than men. And so it's unfortunate because some women aren't caught even in the emergency room because the literature and the research and all of that is so based on, this white male, middle-aged
Yeah.
white male without really any, other comorbid disorders. So it's the research is again slowly getting there, but we're still a long way away from really knowing, what are the best medications and how they react with each person's body, you know, um, in a more diverse way. And that's why I talk a lot to my patients about, knowing yourself and knowing your own body and knowing that people react very much differently and not sort of having this one size fits all view that you should react this way or this dosage should do this. It's
Mhm.
more of a collaborative thing where I want to listen to the person who's experiencing it because they're going to know better than even some of the research that is out there.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really interesting point of view. I was speaking to someone recently about you kind of like with the whole the riots and everything that's happening right now and the Black Lives Matter movement. I was speaking to them about the potential of kind of your environment. So, for instance, sometimes my environment and what I've seen on TV can show maybe African Americans as sometimes as criminals or things like that, and sometimes when you look at that long enough, you tend to almost believe it or take it in, and it weighs on your self conscious a little bit. Now, I thought is that maybe similar for women who feel like maybe they're catcalled every day when they're walking down the street and they see the type of diversity that's out there with the lack of equal pay and not being put on an equal platform as men. Does that kind of take in your opinion, a little bit of uh, does it kind of affect their mental health, women's mental health, a little bit in terms of maybe I don't feel as equal because my environment says that I'm not? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think environment plays a huge role. And I think I mentioned to you, we want to not only look at the biological and the psychological parts, but really the social parts.
Hmm.
You know, even from the very beginning when we're born and how we're raised and society and environment, starts to play a huge role even just from that young age. Little kids pick up on these things. They understand more than we even think, right? And so
Right.
they're really picking up on biases very much early on. Even the way we treat little girls a little bit different from little boys, things like and it's also for the little boys, it can be hard because you might say, oh, don't cry, you're a big boy, you can get through it. Um, you shouldn't show emotions, right? All these different messages that we're sending to even young kids, they're really soaking it in, and it affects them from the very beginning.
Mm,
Something when they've looked at actually that little boys have relationships with other little boys that are very similar to um, open and emotional girls' relationships younger on until they hit puberty. And suddenly society pretty much overwhelms them with messages of how they should behave and how their relationships should be. So
mm,
women, from the very beginning are just sort of experiencing the way society treats them and what messages that society sends them about body image is a huge one, of course. Um, Sort of feeling like they're not being treated maybe as equal. And and of course, again, it also depends on which community that they're in, which neighborhood. I mean, all these factors are so important and affect women's mental health a lot.
right. It's interesting you say that because I was again speaking to somebody about body image and how women must feel, especially in quarantine where you're just sitting on social media all day. I think there's something to be said about these Instagram models, right? We live in a society that is against body shaming. However, I think we see very prominently that what's popular is a Kim Kardashian physique or something like that. And can that be kind of damaging to someone who maybe doesn't have the, I guess, quote unquote, popularity based on, their body image, or, what does it do? What does it do to kind of maybe younger women, especially, who are looking at that and, I mean, looking at such an unrealistic point of view, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It can be a huge problem because even those Instagram models don't look that way. So we, as adults may know that they added their bodies. And even then, even though logically we know, what we see is something different. So
Right.
even though we know, hey, they don't actually look like this in real life, there's a lot of editing. They've made their waist impossibly thin that their organs would not have really a place there.
Right.
Um, and even as adults, we still soak it in, even if we don't realize it. But then if you think about a little girl who may not realize that this is all fake, that this is all edited, that, waists are not, it's impossible for waists to be that small. Um,
Right.
for that little girl, she might start to think, hey, this is, what society says I should look like, but I look very different. And then with puberty, where there's a lot of changes in the body and there's a lot of social pressures to look like the popular image or look like what society expects us to look like. Um, it can lead to a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of body image issues, and can even lead to things like body dysmorphic disorder, where it's the image, the body image that you have of yourself is so drastically negative, even as compared to people who actually see you or your friends or your family or even society. But just overall, all these, messages and these images, they just overwhelm, the mental health defenses and definitely can lead to a lot of issues in the mental health, from a very young age, can also lead to eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, you know, um, and just overall, bad, low self-esteem, constant comparison and checking, and not feeling like you're good enough.
Right. It's interesting because I recently saw a study. My child's mother, she's Caucasian, and I'm African American. So But I recently saw a study where, kids were brought in, and, they brought in African American girls and they brought Caucasian girls in, and they brought a whole bunch of dolls in as well. There was black dolls and there was white dolls. And they asked everyone to identify which doll is beautiful. And pretty much unanimously, all of them identified that the white dolls were the more beautiful ones. And that kind of hurt me because I want my daughter to know that everyone is beautiful, right? Whether you're Asian, white, black, blue, purple, it doesn't matter. I want all women to know that they're beautiful. In regards to that, I wanted to stay on the topic of self-image. What would be the recommendation for some maybe a young girl who is struggling with their self-image, or struggling with maybe feeling beautiful or feeling that they're good enough, as you say? Because I also want to address the issue, but I also want to know, what is the solution per se to an issue like that as well?
Yeah, I think, the study that you brought up is so painful, right, to hear as a parent. So as you can tell by my last name, so my husband is Chinese. And so, thinking about all these sort of biases that society has on what is considered beautiful or what is considered handsome, what is considered feminine, what is considered masculine. It's really painful to think that your child might not feel so beautiful or so handsome, or feel less than because of these society standards and biases that are already imprinted in little kids when they're so young, and they don't even realize where these things are coming from, right? We're not
Right.
that way to judge. Like, none of the judgments we're born with, right?
Right. Right.
uh, it's sort of like judging an apple as being more beautiful than a pear. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
All
Exactly.
these things society puts into our minds from a very young age. And then it's unfortunate that kids have to suffer and then wonder, is my hair beautiful? And have this whole experience of, hair and, should I change my hair? Should I do something to it to make it look more like X, Y, and Z of what people expect? I mean, it's these things that are, hair is what hair is.
Right.
And
Exactly.
all hair should be beautiful. It's natural.
Hmm.
It is what we're born with, but unfortunately society makes us question really ourselves, our natural selves. And the question about, what to do, I would say it's a huge topic, and there's a lot of factors, right? So where there's the individual factor and there's the societal factor. So I definitely think as a society, we need to change, as adults, we need to figure out how to change our society so it's better for the children, so that they don't have to grow up thinking, oh, just because I'm a bit different than, a lot of people around me, or what is on TV, then, I'm considered not as beautiful. I mean, that's just so painful. And
Yeah.
it shouldn't be growing up in that sort of society. So really, hopefully we can take steps forward to try to have more representation of different beauty standards, um, and more diversity of like natural being considered beautiful, and not just sort of the highlighted Instagram models who aren't actually even real. Um,
Right.
exactly. Then, more on the individual level, I think from a young age, kids can pick up on what their parents say. So their parents may be the first exposure. So if the parent has issues with their body image, especially, the daughter watching her mom. So if her mom is sort of checking and thinking, hey, I'm not beautiful because of this, then the daughter can pick those things up. Or if the mom is like, oh, I should lose weight, even if the mom is, normal weight, then again, the daughter can pick that up. Of course, the dad, right? If the dad makes, a comment, even if they don't mean it, and say something about, their weight or anything like that, or hey, maybe you should do this or that, then the child can pick up on that as well. So really making a point for the parents to instill healthy body image, and remembering that, you look beautiful in the way you are and in the natural state that you are. And if you're healthy, that your body is taking you to school, taking you into the playground to be able to do all these fun things. That's what the body is supposed to do, not have a waist that doesn't fit organs.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so instilling these, positive thoughts of this like self-compassion towards your body and positive self-image, it really starts from a very young age. And then, of course, if the kids start to question it, again, supporting them through this, talking about, what are you experiencing on social media or on TV? Let's talk about how those things are unrealistic, and teaching them things that we know, right? That, hey, this Instagram model is not real because she's actually using all kinds of editing apps. Waists don't look like this. um, and doing a lot of education, and of course, if needed, even taking them, to have therapy or anything like that, so that they have a place to discuss these things and really work on self-compassion and good body image from a young age.
Definitely. Absolutely. I 100% agree. And moving on to a little bit of an older age, I feel like when you're a young child, you kind of develop your environment. You're a little bit who you are, right? But when you go to college, that can be like a completely different playground. For instance, maybe you're not around your parents anymore. Maybe you're exposed to a lot of different things, and there's a lot of aspects in college that I find scary for my daughter. There's, sexual assault is more higher in women when you get to college, and things like that. And what are some of the kind of the mental health concerns for someone who is like a woman who's a teenager or going to college in exploring themselves? Is there kind of a definitive, I guess, growth that women go through during that time?
Well, there's a lot of different adjustments. It's a huge step. So you're navigating school that is usually more rigorous than was high school. So then you're navigating this newfound adulthood, while also a lot of times, at least currently in our society, relying on parents, at least somewhat, so then you're trying to navigate, how do I stay close to my family, but also be independent? And how do I, listen to families' input, but also make my own way? Then you're also trying to continue building up your identity. So, who are going to be my friends that I make in college? Which major am I going to choose? There's a lot of pressure around those things, academics, like, I'm choosing what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And that sounds scary, right? So
Yeah.
that's a huge pressure really on people to try to figure all that out during the college years. And the environment is so different, so of course, people are trying to explore, and they may be exploring different things, and then there are also several parts where, women, young women can be at risk. And it's very scary. It's scary for parents and scary for our young women, because it's so unfortunate that there is that risk of sexual assault, which can happen before college, but definitely with, we hear like the frat parties or things like that, or just even in general, right? It can happen anytime, anywhere. And so there are those risks. And then what happens afterwards, once that occurs? Another big part is, unfortunately, the initial reactions of other people can, in a way, I think, determine whether the woman will then suffer from PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, and how she might recover or not recover from what happens. So, I've heard and seen different reactions where, unfortunately, in our society, sometimes this, first reaction is, what did you do? What did you wear? Or, why did you go to this party? Or why did you drink? It's unfortunate, because society really should be saying that, no, the perpetrator is the one at fault at all times. There is no excuse for sexually assaulting someone. Um,
Right.
we don't go to someone who says, hey, this person stole my car, and ask them, well, why did you have a nice car? or why did you park by, by a corner that didn't have a lot of lights? We don't
Mhm.
start blaming the victim right away. Um, Pretty much for any other crime. But unfortunately, in terms of sexual assault, there's such a huge bias in our society that, a lot of people, even well-meaning parents, will, think, oh, well, I told you not to go out to parties, but that's, unfortunately, is just putting in guilt into women and making them feel like it was their fault, when it's never their fault, right? No matter what they wear, where they've been, right? What they were drinking or doing. Um, just as someone is not at fault when someone attacks them or tries to kill them or tries to steal their car, right? There should be no excuse. The perpetrator is always the one that should be at fault.
Mm.
We shouldn't be putting in the guilt into women. And then I see also, so women who report to the school, the colleges sometimes are also, victim blaming, and make them feel bad and put in the guilt. Also, even police, even the ones that are, supposed to be good at this, like the special victims unit, at least in New York City, um, especially if they don't have enough training, or they don't realize, what they're saying and how huge of an impact what they're saying can be. Um, Sometimes they say all these wrong things, and unfortunately, then the young woman internalizes that and internalizes this guilt, which can develop in post-traumatic stress disorder, which can have huge impact on the rest of her life.
Mm. I mean, and I would imagine probably the same can go if you don't say anything either, because how powerful is that to not want to say something because you feel automatically that you'll be shamed or ridiculed or feel guilty somehow. I mean, I couldn't agree more with your statement, because that it seems like such a wrong thing for women to feel in that situation. Just to feel like, if I say something, this is going to be the worst thing for me. Because, I mean, that's awful. That's really awful.
Right. You bring up a good point, is that some women might not say anything because of all these reasons. And, sometimes they might come forward later on And then, of course, like the police is like, why did you wait so long? Well, no wonder she waited so long, or she was scared to say anything when, again, we know from a very young age what the biases are in our society, and we actually, know sort of what's up. So it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that young women can be scared away from reporting these things, because the reality is that sometimes the responses are terrible, and
Mm,
sometimes the women are completely dismissed, and, even worse, made to feel like, it was their fault.
mm. How is it possible to be also a victim of your own relationship? So is it possible to be sexually assaulted within your own relationship?
Yes, definitely. So I presented on intimate partner violence at the United Nations.
I saw that.
Uh, and so it's also, a passionate subject. Um, so we should always have an ability to consent or not to consent when it comes to our own bodies.
Mm,
And that involves, the relationships as well. It doesn't matter if you're dating, it doesn't matter if it's your family member, it doesn't matter if you're married, it doesn't matter if you're married with kids. You should always be able to consent or not to consent. Your body, and it's your choice whether to give consent to the sexual experience. And so some women are sexually assaulted in relationships, and usually the partner is also, doing some sort of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, where they're also physically aggressive in other ways as well. But
right.
definitely, rape is rape, even
Yeah.
if it is within the context of a marriage.
And end of story, right? I mean, that's really definitive. I had someone tell me, and this is interesting, and I want to bring it up to you. I had someone kind of tell me that the narrative of now, even if you're in a relationship or you go on a first date, and the girl says, "Nah, I don't really want to have sex right now. I'm not feeling it or whatever," and the guy keeps on saying, come on, and doing the touching and trying to do some foreplay, but it's unwarranted, and come on, and come on, and then the woman kind of finally gives in. That to me, I mean, the way she described it was so eye-opening and mind-blowing, because that to me seems like almost a form of assault, because I'm continuously pressuring you into something that you really don't want to do. And guys may think it's kind of like maybe a flirty kind of sexual thing to do, but the continuously come on, and after someone says no, that seems to me pretty wrong as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine if it's something, for example, that you don't want to do, and you're being constantly pressured and pressured and pressured, and then um, you may feel this pressure. Oh, hey, they're on a date with me, or they're my boyfriend. So then there's the, society saying like, what you should or shouldn't do, or what's okay and what's not okay. And then society is telling men, again, it's, society is putting in a lot of pressures into men as well that aren't, something that's good for men either, right? Because then society is like, oh, if, you're a masculine man, that's how you play the game. You should, just keep pushing until, you get to what you want to get to. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a narrative from society on young boys, right? And so they're learning this, and then that they're doing this, and the girl can just, I mean, it's so uncomfortable when someone, keeps pressuring you to do something, um, something intimate, or something very important, and it's constant pressure. And what she might feel afterwards, right? What is she going to think of herself, and of that experience? And it can definitely be traumatizing.
Yeah. I would love to. I'd love for you to, teach me in a way too, because it's so interesting that you say that, because um, I find it maybe really uncomfortable for a woman to be almost treated like I mean, really treated like an object. So, and I say that in the context of, I to be honest, I didn't really have my dad to kind of teach me about the ways of, women and in college and things like that. So when I got to college, my um, quote unquote thinking of how college was so um, man like, because in college it was so like you watch movies and things, it's so sexualized. So I'm here to have sex, and I'm here to go to parties, and we're hooking up with each other. I'm on Tinder every day, and that's how it is. And so, and I bring that up because you brought up a good point, because it's not that I feel necessarily like that's how it is, especially being older now. I know, but as a man, I think there's a lot of things out there that tells you like it's about sex, 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 and but then you don't think about, well, that's really disrespectful as well. You know what I mean? And you kind of get what I'm saying. I'd love for you to teach me how do we teach consent first of all, and how do we break that stigma for men as well, to not have to really just think of women as an object, to be honest.
Yeah, I think, that's why I talk a lot about how our society affects little boys and men. Um, Even though we're talking about women's mental health, um, the other side is very important, right? So what we teach our little boys, and what messages we send to, little boys up to men, and how all these biases and all these messages get ingrained in them. And it's a disservice not only to our women, right? Our daughters, our mothers, our sisters, just women in society, but also a disservice uh, to our males, because they're being pressured and being told, you need to do this, or you need to do that, or you need to think this way. And it's also really unfair, because they may actually not feel that way. And then, let's say if society says, hey, you should be able to have sex with 20 women and then not feel any emotions. What if, you're feeling emotions and you're not feeling so great, and then you're feeling empty? But then you're like wondering, well, society said I shouldn't feel anything, I should be celebrating this. And it's just, again, very unfortunate. So it is important to discuss consent very young, from when kids are young, and little boys is important, because um, we should teach our, our boys and our men, what consent means, and how to try to obtain consent, and when to know when not, not to go forward, or not to push, or not to think these things. Also, talking about the differences, what's on TV in the movies, and in pornography, and what is the difference with real relationships, when most people, like, they want a loving long-term relationship that's close and that's supportive ultimately. Uh, but society is telling men something completely different, that
Mm,
saying like, oh, that's not what you should want, or that's not, what you should be trying to get. Um, so teaching consent very young, of, when the girl says no, to respect her boundaries. That although in movies they might show, hey, the guy is pushing, 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 or, the guy is doing this, that's not something that would lead to a good relationship.
mm.
In the real world, and that's not something that you should try to emulate. And also something that can, get you in a lot of trouble as well, and so again, it's like the social level that we really have to work on.
Yeah.
Really need to change society around that, but also the individual level. We need to prevent boys from becoming perpetrators. And again, they're not born that way.
Right.
Like society just puts so much bias, so many messages, um, says that, oh, you should see the girl or the woman as just an object. It's a narrative that comes with growing up and being in this society.
If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has the tools to allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Yeah, definitely. And you brought up something, and I'm trying to think of how to phrase it, but I think you can pick up on it. You mentioned pornography. I read somewhere that some pornography can be damaging into maybe men's thoughts of women as well, because some of it can be kind of degrading in a sense. And did you kind of get what I mean? Is that something that plays a part into maybe being unequal on a playground with men or as well with women? You kind of get what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think it can definitely affect, especially if you think about, what age do boys start watching pornography, right? So again, as you're developing and you don't know yet how the world works, you haven't discovered yourself. So a lot of images or narratives at a very young age um, are sort of shaping you in different ways, in ways that you might not even be conscious of, right? So little boys, they're watching pornography and then they're seeing like, oh, hey, in this porno, which a lot of pornos, not all of them, but a lot of them will have, you know, very sort of degrading images or, pretty much like if it was real, it would be sort of physically abusive, right? So the man on the screen might, slap the woman or, if she's saying no, he might go forward, right? Like, we wonder then, like, well, where are boys then getting this idea? Well, where
Right.
do you think, right?
Right.
If that's all that they see, growing up at a very young age, especially when they haven't really developed, as much of this sense of right and wrong or what should be, what shouldn't be. Um, Again, they're soaking all this in and they're thinking, well, it's happening on screen and these are adults and they're doing it,
Yeah.
so it normalizes these things and like, oh, well, they're just talking about the woman's body. They're not, it's not like the woman is this high profile CEO
Right.
on
Right.
the image, right?
She's not
So
on LinkedIn.
right. It's not like, oh, hey, it's a pornography of this woman, like, being this high powered CEO and doing all these wonderful things,
Right.
So besides maybe the more women friendly, pornography out there, but the majority, that it can be really damaging. So again, maybe even incorporating that and for parents not to shy away from these subjects. Believe me, the kids are watching it.
Definitely.
So not talking about it doesn't mean that they don't know about it. um, they're watching it, and it's great to have then an adult explain the difference between, imaginary or, sort of this role play thing that these people are doing for a job, right?
Right, right.
Reality every day, that those things are different, just like movies. We can't say that's the reality and that's how we should act. So
Mm.
having the parents really explain those things is important. You have to address it because it's out there. The kids are watching it. The kids are doing it, all these things. It's better to talk about it than pretend like it's not out there, and for the kids to then take it as though this is reality and this is how I should be acting.
You're so right. And I think it's really important, as you mentioned. I just spoke to someone about the importance of really confronting your children about sex and having a really open dialogue with them. I think as a parent, especially as a father towards a daughter, it seems really uncomfortable. But I think it's important that you have those conversations because it can really protect them in a sense and maybe make them into a better person and recognize of some of those differences between this is a fantasy and this is reality and this is what I should do and that's just role play, as you say. So I think that is really important. One of the topics I am excited to speak to you about is the Metoo movement. So going forward on the terms of kind of consent and predatory behaviors and things like that, there's this Me Too movement out there, and I think a lot of men just believe it's just a movement to stop people from saying sexual things in the workplace, right? But I think it's more deeper than that, and I would love for you to elaborate on what it is and maybe what it means to you.
Well, I think, it is a complex topic, certainly, and it can mean different things for different people. But one of the things that I do find that I've seen, at least, from my perspective and my experience, is that women are becoming more comfortable with sharing things that have happened to them, in the past, and really calling it out. And for then other women or other people then being more open to hearing those things and, supporting them through those experiences. So often before, I find that a lot of it was kept secret. And we talked about the shame, the guilt, the being scared of, confronting people or, reporting it to the police. And then I see these women who have kept the like certain secrets of their teachers acting inappropriately with them, or things that almost even happened where usually sort of like the older males, um, and even like people in power, right, the bosses, like telling them to um, come to dinner and then do this and do that. And the women have kept this secret their whole lives, and then with this sort of movement, and hearing about this movement, all of a sudden they're sharing it and they're like, this actually happened to me and it was really traumatic, and I've never said it to anyone in my whole life. And it can feel really relieved, and it can be sort of part of the recovery and um, this taking back control of being able to share it with others, and it being more acceptable in society to share it with others and to not be blamed, as much automatically, on that. So I think, these different movements can help push our society in the right direction. Um, I can see where, some men can feel scared or uncomfortable, and, they wonder, what is it? Is it an attack on me? Some people can feel very defensive, or, they might wonder that that means that, it's an attack on men. And I think again, as I talked about, boys are so important and as girls are important, and it's sort of a process of us coming together and moving society forward together. Because you can't just tell the girl to be able to say no. You have to teach the boy to be able to receive the no and not continue acting a certain way, right? So, um, human rights are actually, I think, women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. So that all these different parts, I think, are all together, and we should all really work together because it's better, right, for men to elevate women's rights, women's mental health, because they have moms, they have daughters,
Yeah.
right? They have sisters. So it's not just about some unknown women. It's really about their own families and the future generations, and for the boys, to grow up in a society where they don't feel pressure to do things that maybe they would have never done if society didn't tell them that that should be what they should be doing, right? So
Right.
again, I think it's good for both parties, so for both women and men.
It's really inspiring listening to you, because some of the things that you say, I'm like, oh, that's so spot on. I had an athlete friend of mine who went to college thinking a certain way, right? And as he was when he was kind of engaging in multiple sexual partners, and he felt like this isn't really who I want to be. But a lot of his teammates around him were like, no, this. I'm telling you, this is who you want to be. But he's like, no, that's not really me. I'm speaking to him about it, and I'm like, me neither. I feel so right with you. Like, I think there's a lot of pressure around you to say like this is who you're supposed to be. But I think being a part of being authentic and being appropriate is kind of maybe just taking a step back and look at the reality of your situations, meaning, women aren't objects, and you don't have to sleep with a lot of women to gain respect or anything like that. I think maybe more women would respect you just for being yourself and not being kind of like the typical athlete jerk, right? It's very interesting. And, I had someone tell me about the Metoo movement. He was telling me, it seems like I can never ask out another coworker who I think is cute ever again. And I think maybe there's just like a difference between being inappropriate and appropriate. I mean, right? I mean, I think what Me Too movement isn't saying never flirt with women again, but I think it's about knowing the types of appropriateness in the language that you're using with women. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think, again, if people get scared because they're like, does that mean I can never ask anyone out, or like, they start to think of these different things in sort of a black and white, way, and sort of these extremes, like either everything is acceptable or nothing is acceptable, right?
Right,
But
right.
in our world and in our life, things are in between, right? So it doesn't mean that everything's not acceptable, like that you can never, ask anyone out. There's a difference between, appropriately, checking in, asking someone, do they want to go on a date, um, versus saying, hey, if you want this higher position in the company, um, then you need to, have dinner with me. And then, or saying like, hey, we're just going to discuss, we're going to have a meeting, but you meet me at the bar, but we're going to discuss work. And then the next thing they're trying to order a lot of drinks, it gets you drunk, and then trying to push, slowly into things. So that's a difference between like, hey, do you want to go out on a date? You seem very nice and things like that, versus, the sort of manipulative and utilizing power and control and pressure. when the woman is, saying, no, I don't want another drink. I don't feel comfortable, having a meeting about work in a bar, or, I don't want to go to the hotel. So I think there's a big difference, and
Yeah.
in a way, a lot of us intuitively will feel and we will know that, hey, one is right and one is wrong, and there's
Right.
something, not right with one of the scenarios. And again, it
Mm.
doesn't apply to every single scenario where, um, the guy just likes the girl, and she can say yes or no. He's not manipulating her in any way. He's not using power or control in any way. She's just putting it out on the table, and she's able to then, give consent or not give consent.
Mm. I completely agree. And a couple of just last bit of questions I wanted to ask you. Do you think it's somewhat like appropriate for like, is it appropriate for a woman to kind of use maybe their Instagram model looks, and do you think they have like a certain responsibility to set a good example, or do you think it's appropriate for them to kind of boost their own sexual self? Because it's interesting, because with my talks with my friends who are guys, you never know whether it's appropriate to say, like, if that's my girlfriend, I don't want you posting things like that, or maybe go ahead and do it. It's your body. So I think men get kind of confused on what's the right way to go, and I get kind of confused on maybe how women feel as well. I want to ask your opinion.
Do you mean sort of in a context of a relationship, where the girlfriend is posting certain things and
Yeah.
well, I think in relationships, as always, there should be communication. It's
Yeah.
such a huge part, Both parties should be able to express their feelings, because whatever the feelings are, they're your feelings. That's what you're feeling, and you should be able to share those things and talk through those things. Um, so it shouldn't be dismissed on either side, right? So if the guy is saying, like, hey, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable about this picture, I respect you, your body, you're
Yeah.
beautiful, and I'm so happy you feel confident. But I just want to share my feelings. Like, it is making me feel a little uncomfortable because of X, Y, and Z, and I'm just wondering if we can discuss it. And then the woman should be able to express her feelings, like, hey, this makes me feel more confident, or this is my job, I'm making money off
Right.
of Instagram or whatever it is. And there should be a discussion where, there's communication, and where both parties can come to an understanding of both sides, and
Hmm.
where can they feel comfortable together. And that's why I also find, like, couples therapy can be really great, whether the people are, married or not married. But it's really talking about you're a team, and you're elevating each other, and you always want to hear out each person's point of view. Because in teamwork, it's like 50-50. Each person should be heard, and you should be able to talk through any subject, even if the subjects are very difficult.
Mm. I like that. And another thing, and these are just male rapid questions to you, because, and so if they sound ridiculous, they probably are, because they're my questions. uh, I wanted to ask you as well. Is it possible? Can women get, like, does that cause anxiety a lot? Because I feel like if you're a woman and you're constantly feel like you're being treated as an object, and you have kind of all of these, sexual factors around you, like, I might get assaulted, or maybe this person only wants me for sex. Maybe the only reason I'm being brought to this date, and, like, am I being expected to have sex the first night? Because can that cause anxiety for women? I imagine it does. I don't know.
Definitely. So I think about, sometimes when we live in our society, there's also a lot of chronic anxieties. So thinking about from the woman's perspective, it can really feel like this chronic anxiety, like from the moment she steps outside, right? If she's, I use New York City as an example because I live here, but you're walking along and then someone whistles and it can feel threatening, even if you're not sure, just knowing as a woman that in a way you could be vulnerable. And that's an anxiety, thought because you know what can happen. So even like small exchanges like that every day, it's this chronic stress that's like all the time, and uh, really making you feel, not as in control, and just having this chronic level of anxiety, constantly wondering, um, okay, is it safe to go out at this time? Should I call an Uber at this time? Oh, that guy is looking at me, you know, could that be an unsafe thing? And it might be that he's just like checking her out, and nothing
Right.
like that. But again, it's just being a woman in that society, um, it causes this chronic stress, that can happen. And then you're wondering, well, asking for a raise, right? Like, am I paid less because I'm a woman? Well, a lot of times they are, right? And
Right.
if I say something, are they gonna think that, I'm disruptive, because the bias is that women should be, nice and nurturing and shouldn't make a ruckus and shouldn't bring things up or push for things. So all these little factors, it's really exhausting, to have to
Mm.
think about all these little things, is the shirt like too low? Is this shirt not too low? Is the skirt too short? Is this, some things that maybe the man might not be thinking about every day, like, oh, is this, shirt the right shirt or not? They might just like the
Yeah.
style, not like the style. But for a woman, living in a certain society, it can be a constant thing on their minds. And definitely, again, we can have chronic stress, from different biases. And again, it's not just, the female male thing, but it's also racial thing. If you're constantly overwhelmed with biases and different things about the society, it's really difficult and it really adds up. And I think sometimes quite often it can come out as a lot of mental health issues, because if you're just going through this chronic stress, a lot of times eventually it gets to you, and it's just very difficult.
And what are some of those mental health issues that come out of that?
Well, I think, as we look at any really mental health issue, so we want to look at biological, psychological, and the social aspect. So the social aspect, it can come out in different ways in different people, So some people might have more depression, right? Um, so some people might have more anxiety. Some people might have phobias. Some people might have PTSD. It really depends on, humans are very complex. So it's not like there's a straight answer of like, well, being catcalled every day, or, worrying about your safety, or thinking about these differences of how you're being treated as a woman, will lead to, this specific thing. It just adds to it. It doesn't mean you will have it, or, you might not have any, specific disorders, um, but it can definitely add to it over time.
Mm. And is depression, would you say, is with women, is that a harder, is it harder to treat in women, or do women experience depression in a a different but a more major way than men, for instance, like because I think about this and I think, the only thing I worry about on a daily basis is with my kid in quarantine. I'm getting a little bit of a dad bod, but that's the only thing I worry about. but women have so much constant worry all the time. Like you said, even just stepping out on the street. So what are the like ramifications of that with the depression? Do women struggle more with depression?
Well, I would say that we don't know everything. So in terms of trying to give you the most evidence-based answer is that we probably haven't really looked at everything or haven't considered everything. Um, that also men actually have a lot of pressure as well that they might not even verbalize or, consciously think about, but again, the society pressures and putting us in certain roles. So the man might have the pressure of being the provider or
Mm,
making X amount of money, right? And maybe being stoic and not sharing feelings. And we can see that, men actually their life expectancy, tends to be shorter. And they might die from cardiac disease faster.
hmm
All these different factors can actually have a huge effect. Um, it might mean that men might not come to treatment as often as women because they're told don't talk about your feelings, or, um, don't try to seek help when you're struggling because you should be strong, and
Right, right.
push it down, right? Just because they don't come to treatment doesn't mean that they're not experiencing these
Mhm.
difficulties. So again, I think there's a lot of people who are experiencing difficulties that are just maybe not coming into treatment or not voicing it, but doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It's definitely there.
And then, lastly, I wanted to ask you, within your email, you brought up a great point. Kind of, and I think to as a testament, true to form, you just brought it up again. There's not a lot of research in regards to women in mental health. So we brought up a lot of causes and problems that exist today. But I also wanted to talk about some solutions. So for any woman who is listening to this podcast and listening to you, which you are amazing, so why wouldn't you? I would really love for you maybe to share some advice or solutions on how to deal with a lot of things that we discussed, including managing mental health as a woman.
Well, I would say that it's important to definitely seek a professional mental health care provider, that's licensed in your state, for your specific experiences. So what I say is it's going to be very general and it's not going to be really medical advice. It's going to be informational.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it because our human experience is so complex and there's so many factors for each person. So it's difficult to sort of have an advice for every single person. It's sort of a lot of these things
Sure.
are general and aren't gonna apply to everyone. So, definitely great to if you need the help reaching out. So there's more and more women in mental health care, so you are able to find a professional mental health care provider that's a female if that's, someone you feel like maybe you're more comfortable with. Um, there are specialists in perinatal psychiatry. So that's important to know that there are out there, and if you just go on Google and look for them, there's ones that have had more experience and more training in perinatal psychiatry. So if you're pregnant or you had just given birth, um, you should feel comfortable to be able to try to find some help and someone who really knows about that experience and knows when not to pathologize things that are completely normal during that period, because what normal may look different with all the hormones and all the different things. Um, and who's able to, monitor for safety, and also know when things aren't normal, when it's something that, you should be experiencing. Um, so, being comfortable to search for help. And I also, I think of mental health similar to like physical health, right? It's not something we have to wait until we have a disorder to look out for and to try to get it. I think of preventative care and sort of like we may want to exercise weekly, or that's the recommendation, right? Like, we want to think about our mind as well as our body and how we take care of both, not just when things are going very wrong and we're at the end. Yes, definitely search for help then, but you can definitely, get support and think about these things way earlier, preventative measures, just self-care in general. There's definitely more and more articles coming out in terms of women's mental health, more mental health care providers talking about how to specifically address women's mental health. So there's things out there. There's books about different experiences as well. So how do we address, body image? How do we think about that? And how do we realize we're not alone in different experiences when we're experiencing bias in society or different anxieties? Knowing that you're not alone and that this information is out there can be sort of the first step, is really realizing you're not just on this island, you're feeling just completely alone and feeling like you can't get help. Knowing that there's people out there that are talking about this, so gaining that information, finding the right people to support you. There's also support groups, so for different stages as well. So again, that's where you can get a lot of empathy and support from other women who are experiencing similar things, whether it's young single women or women who are pregnant. So support groups can be really great. So not just the individual mental health care provider, but also just support groups in general, where you can have several people talking about similar experiences, really empathizing with you and really knowing your perspective, and helping you think through it, and discover what's going on, and making you feel better about it. But it's a daily thing, it's sort of thinking about it, just sort of when you're thinking about, okay, how do I get an exercise routine going? It's not going to be easy. You have to, start one step at a time. But it's a practice. It's not just a one-time thing.
Right. Absolutely. Ooh, yeah, you are very inspiring. And why I do this podcast is I have become really open with my mental health. I had a little bit of a rough childhood, and I'm always thinking about how can I express myself, because I felt different from a lot of my peers, meaning a lot of times I tried to speak to my friend about something the other day. I said, hey, listen, this and this happened to me. And he's like, that's crazy. And that's all he said. Men don't really, men have a tendency not to really speak with each other on a deeper emotional level like that. And what I wanted to do is really express in my own mental health publicly, and kind of hope that other men can too. And I also wanted to share mental health in general and spread mental health awareness. And that also means with women, and speaking with you and having a daughter. I think it really helps me. And I absolutely know that your son is going to be like Prince Charming. And so, but here's the thing. That's why I need rapid answers so I can get you out of here. But these are all father questions but for women. Best thing to get a woman while she's on her period. What would you recommend?
uh, well, I think as always, it'll depend on the woman. But I think a lot of times like chocolate can be pretty good. Whatever they like and can be helpful. So sometimes it's chocolate. It can be like a hot cup of tea.
Right.
Anything that's supportive and that shows like, hey, I know you're struggling. But I'm here for you.
What is I heard I keep hearing this, but the most heartbreaking thing to hear from your father is I'm disappointed in you. Is that true or not? 'Cause I'm gonna use it one day.
Um, I think it's a very painful sentence, right? If you hear like I'm disappointed in you, because when kids are growing up as they're little, parents can be their whole world before their peers come in and society and all
Right.
that. But when at like certain developmental stages, parents are sort of like the whole world. So, it can be very painful then to know that, hey, the parent is not liking you the way you are, or saying that you haven't come up to their expectations.
Right. Okay. Um, Going through a teenager's, specifically a woman's phone while they're a teenager, bad or as a parent, what do you do? What do you do? I don't know. Is that good or bad?
Oh, these are such complex questions.
I know, right? Hard to give a really quick answer.
I would say there's risks on both sides. What is a great first step is communication. So if you can get the child to open up to you and maybe the child to show you things is better than going behind their back and then them finding out that you went behind their back. So just as communication is great in relationships like in marriage and everything, there should be communication with parents and kids as well, because
Right.
trust can be so important. And really, you'd rather, if there's something, one, they're good at deleting things.
Right.
Delete their search histories, and they're usually better at technology than the parents. So it's better for them to show you if there's something going on wrong. And them feeling comfortable to come to you rather than trying to, deceptively do something.
I spoke to the other psychiatrist who speaks about like sex and parenting and things like that. She said you should be comfortable enough, or your children should be comfortable enough to have sex in your home while and have your approval. For me, that gives me it almost makes my stomach hurt thinking about something like that. Your opinion?
Um, for that one, from my opinion, it's a little bit more complex, because I come from a perspective of there's different cultures, and different sort of norms. And each family is its own culture, norm, situation. What I think is the most important of like them feeling comfortable is them feeling comfortable to come to you and tell them if there's something wrong. Come to you, ask you questions about sex. Come to you if they want condoms or they want birth control. Come to you if they got pregnant. Come to you if someone is doing things that are inappropriate. So I wouldn't say that they have to feel completely comfortable doing things in your home,
Right.
because those can, I mean, they could be doing things, but they're not telling you, and it could be something that's wrong for them. It's more, I would say, them feeling comfortable communicating things to you where you can actually then do things to protect them, or talk to them about it.
Interesting. And then last but not least, if my daughter gets a boyfriend, what's my best option? Do I scare the guy, or am I really nice to him? What's best for my child's mental health as a woman?
So I would say back to communication, talking to her about it. And hopefully your relationship is open to the point where she can talk about the positives and the negatives, and bring it up to you if something is not going so well. So it if he's a great guy or if he's not a great guy, chances are she knows more about like how he truly is than what you see on the outside. And
Okay.
so it can definitely be harder for you to judge sort of superficially. But if she's comfortable talking to you about, what's really going on, that's better, where you can give her advice, talk to her about it. Because again, when people try to do things that the teenagers don't like, then they can sort of go the opposite and do things they don't want. If you're not liking the boyfriend and you scare the boyfriend away, what if she then starts to sneak around with the boyfriend, right? So it's better then to have open communication, discuss maybe your concerns, like, hey, X, Y, and Z is maybe concerning, maybe not the best for you. And, instilling into her where, hopefully she can decide, hey, maybe this is actually not a great relationship for me, because
Right.
these things are, logical things that have been brought up, instead of pushing her to have to sneak around and hide it.
Right.
Because then ultimately it's not great for her.
I agree. Well, one more. Is it really true that the wife's dad has to pay for the wedding? Because I looked up prices. They're pretty expensive. Is that true? I don't know. I hear that's like technically what's supposed to happen.
It differs in different cultures, and in different people, so I would say,
No.
again, there's no one size fits all. I know of cultures where the guy's parents pay for the wedding. I know of cultures where the girl's parents pay for the wedding. And I know individual couples that say, hey, we actually want to pay for our own wedding, and we don't care about the parents paying for it, even if they're within those cultures. So again, it really depends on, I think, mostly the couple and what their ideas are and what their feelings about it are, and communication with, your daughter or your son, rather than assuming that there's, a certain way that has to be done, or, doesn't has to be. Again, I think it's up to the people to decide. There's usually not a lot of has to or shouldn't.
I bet that's a good point. I might go to her one day and be like, in fact, you owe me technically for all these diapers I buy. Well, honestly, thank you so much. This was actually a really fun one. Getting to speak to you and learning more. You gave me a lot of advice. And I know I asked some silly questions at the end, but in general, I'm really happy I got to speak with you. I think for any man listening to this, I feel like they got a lot of great tips and really great useful things to use for their relationships. And for any woman, I hope that she feels inspired listening to you and goes and follows you. Where can people follow you online?
Well, I'm on Instagram because, I try to spread mental health awareness and decrease stigma. And my Instagram handle, I guess, is Dr. Susanna. I also have a website, SusannaChenMD.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to you telling me you gave birth to a really healthy boy. You're almost due. And really, it was really joy. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. And just to put in the like small disclaimer is that, you know, um, this is for informational purposes only. None of this, is medical advice, again, because each person is different and they should really, seek out a mental health care professional that's licensed in their state and can really help them for their individual needs, because that's what everyone deserves. It's nice to have sort of general thoughts and general education, but it's important to know that you deserve also the individual care and support for your specific needs.
Amen. And when my daughter's older, I'll send her your way. Thank you so much, Doctor. I really appreciate you, and I hope you stay safe with everything going on out there. And thank you for coming on and hopefully helping breaking the stigma a little bit more.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, what an amazing episode. If you're a woman, I hope you found it empowering. If you're a man, I hope you found it very informational, and I think it's informational. Now I just don't know. Informative. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Informative. There we go. I hope you found it informative. I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Susanna Chen. She was so gracious with her time, and I could tell. I'm just asking silly questions from a man's point of view, and she really gave me her best answers on some things that I was just generally curious about, and I really do think so highly of her, and what a role model, and just an amazing person to speak to. And I'm not sure if she practices in other states, but amazing. It appears as a psychiatrist, and I hope people reach out to her. And I wish her a healthy and safe pregnancy. I'm so excited for her. And I want to say again, this podcast for me is all about just spreading mental health awareness. And if you are ever in a crisis, please look up, different things to help yourself. Maybe the suicide prevention hotline, reach out to someone, talk to someone. It's okay to not be okay. And it's so healing to vent like this. And that's what it is for me. It's healing. It's cathartic just to speak to, people and get some information and vent and talk about your feelings and just get some things off your chest. Yeah, I love it. I really do. I have some great guests coming up, and under this episode, there will be a link to support the podcast. If you want, a small donation would really help the podcast into growing into better quality. And we're also creating a mental health app. More details on that will be coming soon. I promise it'll be coming soon. I just, we're not there yet, but I'm really excited to share that with you guys as well. Please follow us on Instagram. Other than that, guys, I'm really happy that you tuned in to listen. And if you are someone out there that resonated with this episode or any other episodes of mine, let me know. Shoot me a DM, email me. I'm always open to new ideas and interested in getting different guests on the show as well. Thank you so much. Just remember, we stand together, we vent together as a pack. VentPack.